Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Automate Without Limits, Meet Ranorex Driver. My name is John Reynolds and I will be the presenter for today's webinar. But before we do get started, I do have a couple of housekeeping announcements to make. Throughout the entire webinar, everyone will be kept on mute. Our team will be able to answer questions through the Q&A panel. This panel is usually located in the upper right corner of the GoToWebinar console. So any questions you have throughout the webinar, you can ask them directly in there and we will answer them during the webinar through the chat console. This webinar is also being recorded so that you can watch it again later or share it with anyone else on your team. As long as you've registered for the webinar, you should receive a recording link within about 48 hours after the session ends. Now let's take a look at the agenda for today's webinar. So first, we're just going to talk about actually what Ranorex Driver is, since this is a new tool available with Ranorex Studio. Then we'll cover how to install and configure the application, which is very straightforward. We're going to perform a couple of demonstrations using the standard Windows calculator application. Then I'm going to cover a sample application demonstration using the Ranorex demo application, which is available from our website as well. Then we'll cover some frequently asked questions, which we anticipate many of our customers may have, and then we will do some live Q&A at the end of the webinar to wrap everything up. So now some of you may be asking, what is Ranorex Driver? Ranorex Driver, which we may sometimes call RX Driver, it's an installable application which just runs as a service on your machine. This service or tool then receives Selenium WebDriver 3 requests to automate desktop applications. So now you can use Selenium WebDriver code that you may already be used to automate desktop applications and perform your testing. So this code can be written in any programming language, Java, PHP, Python, whatever you prefer, as long as you are able to send these Selenium requests to the endpoint, which is created when the application is running as a service. So the application just opens a port on your machine and will receive these requests from whichever tool you're using. All right, since Selenium WebDriver typically is just used for HTML, there are going to be some functions with WebDriver which are not supported by Ranorex Driver. So here's just a general list of methods and functionality that's supported using Ranorex Driver, since items associated with JavaScript or other things specific to HTML won't really apply here. But in general, we're going to use methods to find elements by Xpath, click on them, set values, and get text attributes or take screenshots. So we're going to use the core functionality really of WebDriver with Ranorex Driver. So the first thing you need to do is install Ranorex Driver. If you are using a current version of Ranorex, we can provide an installer for Ranorex 10.1.2 or later. All you need to do is reach out to our support team. In one of the very soon to be released Ranorex Studio releases, Ranorex Driver is going to be automatically bundled. But at the time of this webinar, Ranorex Driver is available as a separate download. Just reach out to our support team to receive the file. So once you have the installer, install it, and then just launch Ranorex Driver. Once it's launched, you can check in your system tray to see that it's running. And if you right-click on the icon, you can also see the port number that it's listening on. You can find a link to the user guide, the version number, and that's about all there is to it. If you need to close it down, just click the exit button there if needed. It's important to note that Ranorex Driver must be the same version as your Ranorex Studio version. So if you're using, say, Ranorex 9.5, you will not be able to use Ranorex Driver. You would have to upgrade to a more recent version. This is one of the reasons why we're going to make sure it's just going to be bundled inside Ranorex Studio very soon, so that you don't have to worry about updating Ranorex Driver along with Ranorex Studio. To configure Ranorex Driver, all you need to do is open the config.toml file inside the directory listed here, so CU program data for Ranorex Driver. After you run Ranorex Driver for the first time, this file will be automatically created for you. If it's not there if you want to just set the configuration before you launch the file, there are just 3 variables to set: the address, the port, and the debug value. And then if the application is running, just restart it. And that's all it takes to configure Ranorex Driver. But if you have a specific IP address you're going to be connecting to, or a port, you can just modify those values there, and then the debugging setting if you desire. So now let's take a look at an example Python script. So since Ranorex Driver accepts Selenium requests, I'm not going to be using Ranorex Studio to execute any tests. I'm going to just be using some scripts that I've written in Python. I am no Python expert, so please forgive me if you see where these functions could be improved or some syntax changes or whatever. I wrote these up to just kind of provide a demonstration of how Ranorex Driver can work. So here in this script, the main functionality here is we set up the connection to Ranorex Driver using the browser name, which is always going to be Ranorex, the RX app. In this object here is the calculator app, so that is the application under test. You can see some more information about this, the driver configuration on our documentation page. And then we just print the driver title just to show the application under test. And then we perform a few actions here. So we will find a couple of items by Xpath. If you look at the Xpath here, you can see we're looking for the number 2 button, which we will then click. We will then find an element by Xpath, the number 1 button, and click that. And then we will find the multiply button and click that. And then click the number 2 button again. We will send the equal sign through the keys. And then we will get the output and print this result. So if you read through this, it looks like we're going to take 21, multiply it by 2, and view the result. So let's take a look at this in action using Python and Ranorex Driver. All right, so now I am in PyCharm. So I just have a basic PyCharm project here. This is almost identical to what you saw in the previous slide. However, I did put in a few sleeps on this, because if I did not put sleeps in here, this demonstration would go way too fast to really be able to present. So first, I am going to make sure I have Ranorex Driver starting. So if I hit start here, now it should just, it's now running here. If I look here, it says connected, port 7993, I am good to go. So now let's just go ahead and run this sample application, which will basically do 21 times 2. Does not bring the application to the forefront. And there we go, it's all done. I'm going to run this one more time. For some reason the application started in the background last time, but there we go, it just ran in the foreground this time. So I just did 21 times 2. I'm going to slow this down just a little bit here. I'm going to make this like a 2-second delay, just so we can see this happen a little slower. Now let's go ahead and run it again. So I'm just putting a 2-second pause just so you can see the buttons in action. So 21, I click the multiply button, click the 2 button again, I hit the equal sign, capture the result, and print it, and then close the app. So that's just a straightforward app demonstration for the calculator app. A very important thing to have of note here is you should have the Xpaths for the items. So if you are using Ranorex Studio, you should be collecting the Xpaths for the items and using those for your application. So as an example here, if I open up the calculator app and I open up Ranorex Spy, waiting on Ranorex Spy to open up a little bit here, there we go. So now if I want to track in the calculator app, so let's do the, which button did we do the to? So if I look here in Ranorex Spy, I can get the XPath for the item. I can use a more flexible path, but using the standard path works just as well. But I could use a more flexible path if necessary. So you would want to gather your, like I said, you want to gather your XPaths for your items and use those for tracking. So I'm going to provide another example using the same calculator application here. I've called this one alternate calculator. So what I did here, instead of finding each button and clicking them, what I did instead is I get the form, basically the entire calculator, and I capture where the result field is. And instead of clicking on items, I send in keys. So I will just basically, as if I was using the keyboard, 21 times 2 equals, and capture the result. So if I go down to my main application here, oops, turn off the breakpoint, let's just activate that function instead. So let's run this again, and you will essentially see pretty much the same thing happen. It will just happen a lot faster. So the keys got sent in a single process. There was a small sleep, but let's run it one more time just so you can see the keys went in so fast, but it all worked. So I could put in a sleep before. Let's put in like a 1 second sleep here after the calculator app opens so that we can just see the pause for a second. 21 times 2, 42. I got the result. So essentially the same process, just using the send keys instead of clicking on elements. And for this one, I only needed 2 paths to be able to complete this process. All right, so now we're going to move on to a more complex example here. This example is going to be based on the Ranorex demo application. This application is available for download from the Ranorex website and is mentioned in our Getting Started guide. So you should be able to find the links right in our user guide. But before I do dive into the Ranorex demo application, I want to take a look into Ranorex Studio and how we're going to use Ranorex Spy to build a repository of elements to then be used for testing. So let's take a look at Ranorex Spy and Ranorex Studio first. All right, so now we have Ranorex Studio open. I am also going to open up Ranorex Spy so we can look at how Ranorex Spy can be used in conjunction with Ranorex Driver to help build your repository of elements. So here you can see in my project already, I have created some folders which contain some various elements here. So for myself, I set these up into a folder of tabs. So in the Ranorex demo application, we have tabs for various items. We have some menu items, so I just created a couple of menu captures just for the generic menus. I'm not going to go into the menus here, but I just captured those as part of my module repository here, or elements. So on the introduction tab, I captured a few fields, which I'm going to be using in our test. Also on the test database tab, I've captured a few fields as well. So let's take a quick look into the demo application so you can see what I am referring to. So here's the demo application. So I'm going to mainly focus on the introduction tab. So on the introduction tab, if I enter some letters, hit submit, it updates the welcome message here. So I'm going to just I'm going to enter in my name here, and validate that this message is updated accordingly. On the test database side, if I enter some information here, so I enter my name, I enter a department, enter an age, I'm going to just say I'm still 29, add an entry, and there we go, it adds a record over here, and then I'm going to actually validate the message information that gets displayed right here. There are other tabs for image-based automation, UI element test area, and a couple of other tabs. I'm not really going to go into those. I'm just going to show an example using the first couple of tabs here. So I don't need this information, so there we go. It's all clear. So if I'm using Ranorex Spy, say I did want to capture a new element here. I'm looking at Ranorex Spy. I will just track in my application here. I'm just going to capture this text block here as well as another element. So if I use Ranorex Spy, I can just click on the item and it gets added. It also gets added to my, actually, let's do that. So that item should be tracked here. Now, if I want to just add an item quickly to my Ranorex module repository without actually using Spy, if I have the application open, I can just hover over the item I'm interested in, Control Windows key, and that will actually capture it using Ranorex Spy in a keyboard shortcut. So as you can see here, this element, this welcome text has been added, so I'm just going to move that down to the introduction tab in my repository because that's where I want it. I've also renamed a lot of these elements here just for myself, just so I can reference them. I just call it test database items on the test database tab. I prefix with test database, and then I put the field name. But this is just what I've done here for this project. One thing very important to note for this particular project and this example, the element repository is actually stored in a flat CS file. So what I've done is I wrote a script in C# or in Python, which will parse this .cs file and identify the element names that I've set up and extract the Xpaths as well. So I take this CS file and parse it into a dictionary in Python so that I can just identify elements in my Python script by the name I've given them in my Ranorex repository. So I don't have to manipulate Xpaths inside of my Python project. I can actually modify and edit items in my Ranorex solution so that anytime I reference this item in my Python project, it will automatically pull the latest XPath that I have here. So if I move something, something moves my application, or I need a more robust path that I've manipulated the path a little bit to have a better result, I can do that, and then I don't need to modify my Python script to capture that element because it's always going to pull that element path, that XPath, out of my Ranorex Studio project. So let's take a look at what I am referring to here. So in my Ranorex Studio project, I've got, this is my demo app example. So what I did, I set up a path to where my Ranorex solution is, the name of my solution, and then I wrote this function that will extract my XPath from this repository. So if I look in here, I parsed basically the CS, or the .cs file, and I strip out the information that I'm interested in. And I basically just build a dictionary of where the key is going to be the element name, and the value will just be the XPath. So when I'm running this script on my demo application, I'm just looking at items by the way I have the item labeled inside my solution. Now, this isn't the way anybody has to do it. This is just the way I chose to do it. Because when you start looking into XPaths for some elements, they can get pretty long. And I find this much easier to read because I can just reference them by element name that I've set up in my solution. So here, let's take a look at my app a little bit more. So I just created a user info object. I'm going to use this as how I am entering in user information. I've got my WebDriver endpoint set up. I just print a demo app line, and I've added some just comment blocks here just to show what I'm doing for a couple of things. So here I am going to just click around. I've just found a couple of items. Click around. I'm going to also enter a username or enter some keys, clear it, and click around on a couple of tabs. So nothing crazy. I'm not going to validate. I'm just going to click around a little bit, press a couple of keys. That's about it. Then I'm going to add a name on the introduction tab and validate that the message is updated. So I put in a little pause. I make sure I need to actually make sure I am on the introduction tab. So before I do that, right, I need to go to, because if I'm not on the introduction tab, it's probably going to fail. There we go. So now I'm going to make sure I click on the introduction tab, and then I find the element by Xpaths. So I find the field name, and I send in my user info first name value, and then I click the submit button, and then I validate that the welcome message is updated correctly, because the welcome message should be welcome, comma, my name followed by an exclamation point. So I'll just put an assertion statement and make sure that welcome message is correct. If it's not, the app will fail. If it is successful, I'm just going to print out a validation in my console log. So second, I am going to in the next step, I'm going to add a user on the database tab and validate this as well. In this particular step is going to fail. I'm failing it on purpose, but I will show you why this fails. I did write a couple of functions, one to just add the user information. What it does is takes information from my user object, and then it adds it through the driver. So I just find the elements, I click on them, add the information. But here also I make sure I am on the database tab, but then I enter in the user information from the user object that I throw through. And once again, I'm still using my elements XPath dictionary. I'm not using every XPath explicitly typed out. If the user, I also make sure that I have the user info. I click on the correct radio button because the gender radio buttons are present. It's not a field where I enter text. I could also put in such as a dot lower method here just to make sure everything's in lowercase to make this more likely to match. So that is my add user option. So then when I'm going to validate an entry, I pull up on the Ranorex demo application. Whoops, wrong click. So if I click on this test database, I validate the entry. What I do is I pull this, a row will appear here. So I pull that row out. And I look at the data in that row and compare it to make sure that it validates correctly. So I expect my name, age, gender, and department to appear as I entered it in. And then I will go through another option here, or method, section of my code, I guess, where I actually add a user properly and validate it where this will pass. But in order for this to pass, I will end up commenting this out because this is going to fail with an assertion error. So let's take a look at this in action. And I immediately have an error. Line 185. What did I do wrong? 133. All right, so this key, I'm not finding this element in my repository. So enter name. That's correct. It is not in my repository. Introduction, enter name. So So this should be on the Introduction tab. Introduction. Text field enter name is what I have labeled here, so let me fix that real quick. So let's go here, line 133, introduction. I could do this here, or I could fix it in my repository. I'm just going to do that here. All right, now let's try running this one more time. There we go, opened up the app. Actually, I already had it running, so it just opened up a second time, and enters the text, cleared it out. So now I expect it to just click around a little bit. I just put in some pauses, so here we go. Now I'm going to validate that my name is entered correctly, and the welcome message matched. As you can see in the console on the left, I did get that confirmation message. So here I'm entering the text for my user information. Hit add entry. And now this fails. As you see, it shows here that I have no department, but I entered in a project management department. The reason for this failure is that this project management field is actually a drop-down. So I need to click on this element and select project management instead of entering it in by text. I may be able to enter it in and hit enter. I don't think that would work, so I'm just going to use keyboard to actually click and select it. So I'm going to fix my code real quick. So let's take a look here. In my user code, I have this already adjusted here. So I have used a different function where it says add user fixed. So this is my fixed code. So let's take a look at that real quick. Let's go back up to the add user fixed. So here I check the department value, and then I click on the department dropdown, and then I click on the correct project. I could have added a bunch of if-else statements here to catch the correct project. Say if I chose a different department, I could have put in multiple if-else statements, but I just wanted to show the basic functionality here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 clicks on this menu and then validate my message. So this should work properly now. Also, looking at the previous run, my assertion error, I dumped out what I expected and what I actually saw. So let's run this one more time here. Oops, I didn't comment out the rest, so we'll just let this run for a second. So I validate the John message. Now this record should go by click instead of keystroke. Added my entry. All right, so that one was successful, but I do have one more error in my code. I did not predict this one coming up. I do have one error where I am trying to find an item, and then let me see what is going on here. I am trying to take a screenshot. One last thing in my app is I'm going to take a screenshot of just the app as it ends. But for some reason, this element is not showing up in my repository either. So I have this here, entire app. All right, so looking here, I have this labeled as entire app. In my solution, I have it labeled as entire app. I'm not sure what exactly the problem is here. It may be something with my file parser. So what I'm going to do is just take the actual Xpath directly and use that. I don't want to spend too much time trying to debug this. So there we go. I've got this set up now with just the Xpath. I'm going to comment out some of the other items that we're not really going to use. I just want to enter that last person, the person one more time, validate it, and get a screenshot. So let's try running this one more time here. There we go. It went straight to the test database tab. Started entering in my user information. Seems to be a little slower than I expected. I might have some resource issues going on my computer, but I added the information. It saved it printed out my statements at the bottom. I did not get any errors, so my screenshot should be good also. Now, part of this application, I did not close the app. I could have just entered in a driver.close statement. I think I just have it commented out, and it would close the application under test. But I did not want to do that here because I just want to keep the application open for demonstration purposes. And here is the screenshot which was saved. So it captured everything on the app, including the state that I was in at the time. So the screenshot save was successful as well. So let me close some things out, and that pretty much wraps up the demonstration on this second application. Everything seems, I was able to enter in some text, validate the application after it changed, validate the text that appeared, take a screenshot, and then I could also send this information off to another tool if I wanted to send my screenshot, my validation, my results. Say I was integrated with another tool in my pipeline and my test was connected to another tool. I could submit my test results to another tool and report on the test's success or failure if failures arose. All right, so before we go into some live Q&A, I just want to cover off some questions that are likely going to come up from our user base. So primarily, what software must install? So what does Ranorex Driver require? Ranorex Driver must be installed on the same machine as Ranorex Studio, so you must have both installed on your machine. And the Ranorex Studio version must match your Ranorex Driver version. Once Ranorex Driver is bundled inside Ranorex Studio in its upcoming release, this shouldn't be much of a problem, but if you do update Ranorex Studio in the meantime, you would have to update your Ranorex Driver as well. Does this second question I've put on here is, does this work with Selenium 4? Currently, no. Ranorex Driver does require Selenium 3 libraries packages. We are looking at Selenium 4 support, but this is not implemented inside Ranorex Driver just yet. Can I configure the port or other settings? Yes, as shown in one of the earlier slides, in the program data Ranorex Driver directory, the settings are found in the config.toml file. The file is automatically created the first time the application is run. Are there app methods supported? Yes, our documentation will provide a list of WebDriver methods supported. Some may not support explicit, say, method calls, such as find element by tag name, but you may have to use something like find element by Xpath instead, as you saw during our Python demonstration. And where can you find this documentation? Documentation is on the Ranorex website. The link here. Also, if you search on our website, you should be able to find Ranorex Driver documentation. And the final question here is, does Ranorex Driver generate any reports in Ranorex Studio? And the answer to this is no, because the testing through Ranorex Driver is actually being done outside of Ranorex Studio. So features such as reports and integrations would need to be handled by your testing tool or automated scripts. So if I'm using, say, PyTest to run my reports or to run my tests, I would need to generate any kind of reporting based on my PyTest results, and these would not be automatically generated by Ranorex, because Ranorex Driver is handling the interaction, but all of the assertions and validations will be done in your testing framework. So with those questions addressed, let's move on to some live Q&A.
Hello, everyone. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that are coming in. So one of the first questions is, does Ranorex Driver use a studio license or runtime license? Our standard licensing should apply here. But if you have any questions, just definitely reach out to your sales or support team about licensing. One of the questions, it looks like Daniel asked if we can get a copy of the file used to parse the CS file, which I can definitely provide that after the webinar. We should have some your registration email, so I can send that to you via the registration email. And we have more questions coming in. We do not have many questions at the moment. We were able to answer quite a few questions throughout the webinar. One of the questions about Spy, Ranorex Spy is automatically included with Ranorex Studio. However, Ranorex Driver at the moment is a separate download. Once we have, so you would need to install Ranorex Driver separately, but Spy and anything else shown during this demonstration is provided as part of Ranorex Studio. And for more questions here, if you already are using Ranorex Studio and do not use Selenium WebDriver, one of the questions from Bernard, was there any advantage to using Ranorex Driver if you currently have Ranorex Studio and have not previously used Selenium? If you have not used Selenium, then Ranorex Driver probably won't be very beneficial or useful to you, but it is geared towards people who already use Selenium WebDriver and do want to automate some desktop applications without needing to mix and match an automation tool or IDE that they're already using to write tests for their browsers. Does Ranorex support any other desktop app that's not developed by Microsoft? That's not. Ranorex Studio is used for Windows desktop applications. We do support mobile, Android and iOS testing as well, but for desktop applications, we only support Microsoft Windows desktop applications at this time. There's a question from Lawrence on what versions of Python do you support? Python support is going to be completely independent of Ranorex Studio or Ranorex Driver. So as long as you are using the Selenium WebDriver 3 code and libraries, then you can use any version of Python that would support those libraries. So a question as to why log files. I believe there's a question from Naveen, but this does not look to be related to actually Ranorex Driver. So if you're ever having problems or issues with your current Ranorex Studio testing, then please reach out to our support team for assistance in troubleshooting your specific issues. One question here is, can I connect to a SQL database to use as a data source? So if you're using Ranorex Driver, you can connect to any data source you wish. If you're using Ranorex Studio, we also support connecting to data sources such as the SQL database. With Ranorex Driver and your code written in any tool you wish, you can use any kind of data source that you can link to your code. A question from Brandon, can you send the PowerPoint presentation afterwards to my registered email? We will share a link to the recording after the webinar. You should get that link within about 48 hours after the webinar ends. So we'll have a recording that you can rewatch the webinar or share with anybody on your team who needs to watch or would be interested in watching the webinar as well. I'm just going to give it just a couple more minutes here on questions. We've been able to stay on top of most of the questions asked, so I'll just give it a couple more minutes for questions, then we will wrap up the webinar here. Question from Lawrence about plans for supporting Selenium 4. This is something we're looking into. We just don't have an ETA on Selenium 4 support just yet. It's not something that I can provide or promise any kind of support on that just yet, but it is something we're looking into. All right, it looks like we've got most of the questions taken care of here. I do want to thank everybody for attending the webinar. If you have any other questions or comments, please reach out to us through your support team or account manager, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you again.